I am proud to know Jimmy Carter. I am proud to have served in his administration. I am proud that he is here in my hometown of Shreveport and Bossier to help us celebrate the 20th anniversary of Community Renewal, and I am proud to call him my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my high honor and my great privilege to present to you the 39th President of the United States, the Honorable Jimmy Carter.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you. You can see why John Dalton's my friend. Anybody that gives you an introduction like that has got to be your friend. Well, this has been a day I will never forget. I flew here early this morning, and I've had a chance to travel around in Bossier City and in Shreveport. And I can say that tonight is another night I will never forget. The music here, I'm sure couldn't be much better when this was open for the theater and was broadcasting Louisiana Hayride. Couldn't be much better. A lot of people ask me how life is since I left the White House, and the best answer I can give them is a cartoon that was in the New Yorker magazine last year. This little boy looks up at his father, and he says, "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be a former president." Well, a former president has a chance to do a lot of extraordinary things and to see the most interesting things in the world, and that's why I enjoy being a former president. I was born and raised in a little town of 600, Plains, Georgia. And my wife was born there too. In fact, when she was born, I lived next door and I was 3 years old. My mother was a registered nurse and took care of her mother. And I looked through the cradle bars the day she was born and saw my future wife lying there. And I don't remember what she had on, but we grew up in the same town, and we still live in the same place. So you might say that Jimmy and Rosa Carter hadn't got anywhere in life. We haven't moved anywhere. Well, Plains is a special town anyway. I still teach Sunday school classes there. In fact, I taught Sunday school classes all the time I was at the Naval Academy. And we have a very small church in Plains called Maranatha. And I have just a few church members that belong to it, but we have a lot of visitors who come to hear a politician, teaching the Bible. And I'd like to invite you all to come to my Sunday school class, not all at one time, but come there. The reason our church is so small is that in 600 people, we have 11 churches. So you can see how that happens. Well, this has been a wonderful life for me. And I think that, like perhaps all of you and the ones behind me on the stage and Mac McCarter, who spoke to us earlier, every one of us would kind of like to put our faith, our religious beliefs, our highest moral and ethical ideals into practical application. But that is one of the most difficult things for a human being to do. There's an enormous fence or bridge between people that have everything that you want: a home in which to live, a modicum of education, food to eat, clothing to wear, a little bit of health care, to realize that many people on earth don't have those things. The Carter Center, where our wife and I work, has programs in 80 countries in the world. And Rosa and I, since I left the White House, we've been in 146 nations on earth. And we've seen a lot of different people and a lot of different kinds of people. Some of them are extremely poor. One of our major programs is in Liberia. And Liberia, when we finished our last election there, and a woman president was elected, first time in the history of Africa. But half the people in Liberia were living on less than $0.50 a day. And about half the people on earth live on less than $2 a day. And just stop for a moment and think how you would live on $2 a day for rent, food, clothing, a little bit of education maybe, and practically no health care. Well, so you see there's an enormous difference, and the difference is growing every year between those of us who have everything we need and those of us who don't have hardly any of those things I just mentioned. Well, what has motivated Mac McCarter here in Shreveport and Bossier City is that ability demonstrated to break down that barrier between the folks that have a lot and the folks that don't have very much. The Carter Center tries to do that. Almost all the countries we work in have terrible diseases, and they don't know how to grow enough food to eat, and a lot of them don't have decent homes. My wife and I work with Habitat for Humanity, which was founded by Mildred and Linda Fuller, who formed the Fuller Center for Housing. And I just went in Allendale this afternoon. I saw where they're just getting ready to build a 50th home there for people that have never lived in a decent home. Early this month, my wife and I were in Texas, next door to Louisiana, if you don't know, and we built 114 houses in Dallas and Fort Worth for people that never had a decent home. And we do that every year. In fact, Rosa and I give 1 week every year to build houses somewhere on earth. And next year we'll go to Nepal, where Mount Everest is, and then the previous 2 years we built homes in Haiti, where the terrible earthquake and hurricane have destroyed that country. We go back and forth between foreign countries and the United States. And that's one of the ways, one of the easiest ways I know, with the Fuller Center for Housing and with Habitat, to cross that barrier that separates rich folks and poor folks. Well, another way that we tried at the Carter Center in Atlanta, I had been to Africa working on one of our programs, and I came back, and the Carter Center has a partnership with Emory University. I've been a professor there now. This is my 33rd year. And when I got back, the president of Emory University, I had breakfast with him. He said, President Carter, you just come back from Ghana at the time. And you also went to Ethiopia, and you went to Nigeria, and you do good things over there. But how about Atlanta, Georgia? What are you doing about the people in Atlanta, Georgia? And I finally decided we will start what we call the Atlanta Project. That was the easiest, simplest name I could think of. So we decided that we would do that as a project of the Carter Center. So I got arrangements to speak to the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, all the big shots in Atlanta. And I told them we were going to start the Atlanta Project. And I went to the local Census Bureau, and I said, I want to know where the poorest people in Atlanta live, so we'll know which people to work with the Atlanta Project. And they said, well, what do you want to know about it? I said, why don't you pick out 2 criteria, 2 measuring sticks that will let us know where the most needy people are. And they went down the list of a lot of things, average family income and so forth. And then when they got down to the bottom, one of them was teenage girls who are pregnant before marriage. And the other one was families that have no man living in the house. And they put that on a map of Atlanta, the southern part of Atlanta. It covered 3 counties. And I said, that's what we want. And then about a week later, I said, how many people live in that area? Because I had already announced to the Chamber of Commerce we were going to take care of it. And I found out it was 500,000 people living there. That's about 2.5 times as many as live in Shreveport. But we were stuck with it. So what do? We finally decided we would divide those 500,000 people into 20 different communities. We call them clusters. 20,000 in a cluster, 25 clusters. And I was responsible for finding out what they needed and for trying to provide for those needs, just like Mac McCarter has done here. And we found out that Atlanta was really two cities. And I would estimate that Bossier City and Shreveport, in some ways, are two cities. One half the city has everything they need. Another half of the city needs a lot. We went into those communities. In fact, I prepared a 20-person staff. They volunteered. And I assigned one of those staff members to every cluster community. My wife took one, I took a different one, and 18 others. And we began to go in there just to learn what the people were doing and what they needed. We found out, for instance, that when they got a welfare check, it cost them $8 to get the check cashed because none of them had access to a local bank. My wife went shopping in the stores in the poor communities. Something that she could buy for 40 cents at the stores near us, like Walmart and so forth, cost the poor people $1. And she found out that when Delta Airlines put an ad in the paper for stewardesses, they put it in the Atlanta Journal and Constitution newspapers, none of those people in the poor countries, in the poor parts, took a newspaper. So all of their daughters and so forth that might be stewardesses didn't have a chance to get a job. And we found out that the people in those areas were not getting their children immunized against the diseases. We also found out that the policemen responsible for those communities didn't live there. They lived in the nice communities, and they went there in the daytime. They were kind of scared to go there at night. And the teachers didn't live there, and the welfare workers didn't live there, and the health workers didn't live there. They lived in the nice places, and they commuted there and back and left those communities by themselves at night. And the people were afraid to go out. And drug dealers would go into the community, and they'd go into an apartment where it didn't have a man in the house. And they would take over the apartment, and they would browbeat or abuse the woman there. And they would make the children be lookouts when they were trading drugs. Those were the kind of things that were going on. I never knew it before. So what I decided to do was to let every cluster community, 20 of them, have a big brother that was a major corporation. So Delta Airlines took one of the clusters, and Coca-Cola Company took one of the clusters, and United Parcel Service took another one of the clusters. IBM took another cluster. Every one of the banks took a cluster. Turner Broadcasting Company took a cluster. Every cluster had a major corporation to take care of those 20,000 people. And I required every corporation to assign to me a vice president to represent that corporation in dealing with those clusters. And later on, we found that they needed a little bit of education there to help them fill out, requests to get government grants and things like that. So we have a lot of universities and colleges in Atlanta. So every cluster had a college or university take them to. Georgia Tech took one, Georgia State University took one, University of Georgia took one, Emory University took one, and Morehouse took one. So every cluster had a major corporation and a major university to care for them. We tried to immunize the kids, but the people were kind of reluctant to deal with the local government in any way. So I had a friend that lived in California. His name was Michael Jackson. So I went to California and talked to Michael Jackson. And I said, Michael, we got a problem in Atlanta with the very poor people who won't get the kids immunized. And he said, I can help you, Mr. President. So he said, you go back to Atlanta and you tell those folks that live there, if you get every child in your family immunized, I'm going to come to Atlanta and put on a concert in the big basketball stadium, and they get a free ticket to hear my concert. So he came to Atlanta. We had 16,000 people there to hear Michael Jackson sing. So we had a lot of cooperation, and it began to improve the lives of the people that live there. They became very proud of themselves, every one of these communities. And they started making the corporations really take care of them. I remember Georgia Tech had one of the universities, and Coca-Cola company is right in Georgia Tech campus almost, and their cluster community began to demand that they had to provide so many jobs before they would let Georgia Tech and Coca-Cola be their sponsors. And they were very nervous if they didn't get one of those clusters. So anyway, it worked out very well. Those are the kind of things that put us on the map. And the Atlanta project turned out to be very successful. Later on, when we finished, we graduated 16 of those 20 clusters. They met all of our standards for improvement. In fact, the women that used to have to pay $8 a day, $8 a check to get that check cashed, they began to deal with the banks, and the bank would have 2-hour training courses on 2 Saturday mornings, and if the women went to those 2 courses on how to write a check and how to take care of a bank account, then they could get their check from the welfare department placed in the bank, and the women could just write a check for groceries and so forth and didn't have to pay any fees. It was good for the banks, and it was good for the people. I was in one of the communities this morning, Allendale. They don't have, I believe they don't have a grocery store there. Well, this is very difficult for people that don't have a grocery store. And that's the kind of thing that can be taken care of. But I would say that the friendship houses that I visited also this morning don't quite have the power and the influence to take care of some of the needs that exist in those communities. And Mac McCarter told me they have 10 friendship houses now to cover all of the needy people in these 2 cities. Would take about 50 more of those friendship houses. And what would it help? It would help the poor people, yes, but it would help Shreveport and Bossier City much more economically than it would help those poor people to bring them up. And what they've already done in reducing crime rates, 40% average crime reduction in every one of those communities that has a friendship house. What can that do to the reputation of a city? What can that do to people coming in here to build new factories? What can that do to people coming in here to open up a new corporation? It can put Shreveport and Bossier City on the American map as one of the outstanding communities in this country and on earth. What it needs is more support from the corporations, the gaming establishments, the colleges, and everyone in this community that has great political, economic, or social influence. They need to form a partnership with this great organization, Community Renewal Institute, and put this whole community on the map for America and for the world. That would help everyone. And that's what we need to do in the future. They have done a tremendous job in the first 20 years. I have seen it with my own eyes, how wonderful the people are living now compared to what they did before they got the friendship houses. What can they do in the future? They can bring in people from all over the world to come here, to put in new plants, to build more schools, to open up new businesses, to provide more gamers along the river. I think that in the future, this Shreveport and Bossier City can be just as famous for having better community renewal as they were famous when this hall was used for the Louisiana Hayride and taught people about country music. I'm very glad to be here. And I have got a new hero in my life now, Mac McCarter, who's done such a wonderful job. I might tell you one little personal secret. One of the most famous performers that ever stood on this stage was my 5th cousin. and his name was Elvis Presley. He was my mother's fourth cousin. So I'm very proud to be here where he was and where June Carter, my cousin, was. So I feel like I've come home tonight, and I hope I can come back in the future to Shreveport and see the tremendous progress that all of you are going to make. Thank you very much.
Oh, wow, what a special night. The president just said, thank you for letting me get a photograph with you. Boy, wait till my grandkids hear that story. I'm going to add a lot to it now. Oh, he's amazing. I'd like to bring Mac McCarter back. He'd like to make a special presentation.
Listen, wasn't our president wonderful? Just great. Thank you. President Carter, I'd like you to join me once again at the dais, if you don't mind. You bet. Now, this is going to take an act of real trust, Mr. President. We want to present to you a check for the Carter Center from Community Renewal for $10,000 in the work that you've done, and that the work that you're doing, and you're going to really have to trust me. You're going to have to trust me when I tell you that the check will be in the mail.
If it's not, I'll be here sooner than I thought I would.
Thank you so much. God bless each and every one of you. And thank you once again for such a night as this.